Entering the Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience Week 11 Weekend Update, rankings, injuries, underdog picks, and a DraftKings ownership update. Smash the like and sub to the channel while you're here. And if you're looking for the rankings list that I'll get updated, hit the show notes. They're all down there in the link right now, and a brand new newsletter with fresh ranks, fresh injuries, fresh picks. Every bit of information you need to know is going to come out on Saturday evening. So please hit that up, Mayo Media Substack, if you're just looking to Google it. All right. This is probably the best week I have seen yet for the injury report. So fingers crossed, nothing crazy happens over the next 24 hours, and we should be pretty clear sailing. Not much has changed throughout the course of the week. So at running back, Tank Bigsby has been declared out against the Detroit Lions. The Jags are more than 2 touchdown favorites at this point, so it's not like Bigsby was likely to do anything anyway. He is not their pass catching back. So I have elevated Travis Etienne up in the rankings to number 21 at running back. Dearness Johnson cracks just inside the top 40 at this point, because there is a scenario where they don't use ETN the entire time. They like to use Dearness Johnson as the pass catching back. Maybe he can soak up 3, 4, 5 receptions if you're in a 16-team league, got injuries, got buys, and you need a flex play. I mean, he's there for you and can score a greasy touchdown at the end. Wouldn't count on that happening, but that's where he's at. So that's 1 spot behind Nick Chubb and 1 spot ahead of Rico Dowdle on Monday Night Football against the Texans. Overall, I like the prospects of Dowdle better. It's just that offensive line is brutal, and they're 7.5-point underdogs. Cooper Rush sucks, so it's a bit of a difficult situation for Rico to get going. At least there could be a ton of garbage time for ETN to start posting some points, and if he can pile it up through receptions, he should be okay in this game. Jamal Williams is out for the New Orleans Saints, so Mims will continue to back up Alvin Kamara this week against the Cleveland Browns. Isaiah Pacheco has been activated off of injured reserve, but he is out for week number 11 against the Buffalo Bills, so keep firing up Kareem Hunt well you can, because that time is probably going to be coming to an end very soon. Probably not next week. Probably the week after, you'll see the reintegration of Isaiah Pacheco back into the Chiefs offense. It's probably not going to be an 80-20 split between him and the rest of the goober running backs that the Chiefs had, but probably something similar to a 50-50, 40-60 type split. And then as we get going into December, once he reaches back to full health, he will reclaim this backfield, and you probably won't see much Kareem Hunt. Samaje Perine's role in the Chiefs offense shouldn't change all that much. He should see 10 to 25% of the snaps depending on the game flow each game and work primarily as the receiving back. However, what we saw last week with Kareem Hunt was him getting more involved in the receiving game because they wanted to have that threat of running and receiving on the field at the same time. We know that that is what Isaiah Pacheco is going to do for the Chiefs the moment that he comes back, because that's the role that he was playing earlier on in the season. It all just depends on health. 2 more injuries, and they're both on the same team, and the inverse of what we thought was happening earlier on in the week. Najee Harris's ankle is fine. He practiced in full. He is off the injury report. He is going to play. All of a sudden, Jaylen Warren pops up on Friday with a back injury. So that's not great. It's against Baltimore. It wasn't a great matchup anyway, so I flipped these guys in the rankings. They're now back-to-back. I have Najee at number 26 at running back and Jaylen Warren at number 27 in the running back rankings. Once again, hit the cheat sheet down in the show notes with all of the rankings lists to find out where everyone comes after the Saturday evening update, all right? Wide receiver, it seems like if you don't play for the Buffalo Bills, then you're probably going to be back this week. Keon Coleman is out for the Bills, and Amari Cooper says that he is going to try and play. There is no confirmation whether or not he's going to be in at home against Kansas City, and he did say with this wrist injury, even if he is active, he's going to be wearing a cast. I hear that's not great when you're trying to catch the ball with Josh Allen zipping it into you in cold weather, so it's kind of weird that he's not playing. Dalton Kincaid is out for this game too, so they probably just need the bodies on the field, but he's a game time decision. He still may not go in this game. I've ranked him outside the top 45 at wide receiver. Even if he's active, I'm looking for better options. Someone like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I like better. Even though he might score 0 points, he might score 25. Unlikely that Amari Cooper is going to do that this week. Other than that, T. Higgins is in with his quad injury. He's been removed from the injury report. Ditto for Tyreek Hill with his wrist injury. I'm still doing dubious about that since they said it was torn ligaments in his wrist. So the way that I've constructed the rankings now, I have T. Higgins in at wide receiver number 15 in the rankings. So a very high-end wide receiver 2 for the week on Sunday Night Football against the Chargers. You can beat these guys deep. That's how you beat them. So if Chase is going to extend the field, it might open up a lot of opportunities for T. Higgins over the middle and those seam routes, like Chase, like Higgins, even in a more difficult matchup against the Chargers. But that 15 ranking is 1 spot ahead of CeeDee Lamb and 2 spots ahead of Tyreek Hill. You can make a very compelling case that CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek should both be like wide receiver 35 with Josh Downs or something like that, with Anthony Richardson back under center. But I would just have a hard time even at this point. The one thing we did see from Cooper Rush, although he absolutely blows, is he tried to force the ball into CeeDee Lamb the entire time. I just worry that this AC joint in his shoulder is eventually just going to take its toll. One bad fall and he could be out of this game. That's a worry. The quarterback situation is a worry. But there's still enough upside with CeeDee Lamb that if he's going to end up getting like 14 targets against the Texans, that's probably going to be pretty good. And Tyreek, like eventually it has to happen. He has one game over 100 yards so far this season. You'd think against the Raiders that would be a smash spot for Tyreek. It just, he doesn't look like Tyreek. The speed is still there, but that wrist is very clearly bothering him. So I just bumped him down to a mid-tier wide receiver too. He's not a bench by any means, but I wouldn't be expecting that overall number 1 wide receiver upside that we've seen from him in the past. You might get one more game out of him like that, but it's been much worse than it's been good so far, even since Tua has returned. So this wrist injury is probably bothering him a ton, and I kind of like the Raiders to keep this one a little bit close in this game. Michael Pittman is going to be in with his back and finger issue. I have Pittman ranked at number 53 in the wide receiver rankings. Not only has he not been good, he's been even worse with phony Tony under center. I have Alec Pierce ranked ahead of Michael Pittman by 1 spot. He's number 52. Josh Downs is number 33 in the wide receiver rankings this week. So a play, just not a great play. Nico Collins is expected to be in. He has practiced in full all week. Saturday practice still for him for Monday Night Football against Dallas. He is wide receiver number 3 in the rankings this week. Devontae Adams is expected to be in with his wrist and illness that he's been dealing with. It's basically touchdown or bust. You need him to stop dropping passes in the end zone. That would be very nice, but he's wide receiver number 12. Garrett Wilson's wide receiver number 7 for the week. That is one of the few offenses that is so concentrated that somehow both receivers could be good and the quarterback might not even be good along with it, fantasy-wise, just because of that overall concentration. I call this the Derek Carr, Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree corollary, where those two guys would be top 15 options every single week, yet Derek Carr really had a very difficult time coming inside the top 20 at quarterback. It's funny how that works out when you don't have these other pieces to throw the ball around to. Juju Smith-Schuster is leaning in with his hamstring injury against the Bills. I have him at wide receiver number 37 in the rankings, so I bumped him up a little bit and bumped down DeAndre Hopkins a little to wide receiver number 25. I am still team DeAndre over Juju, but as we've seen with the Chiefs offense time over time is that it could be anyone on any given week. Pencil in Travis Kelce for his beaucoup targets in every single game, but that doesn't mean that Noah Gray is not going to outscore Juju or Worthy's not going to outscore Hopkins. You just have to play the best of your abilities, and the guy with the highest upside from the receiving core, who's not a tight end, is going to be DeAndre Hopkins this week, and Juju maybe gets a little bit of work over the middle, but I do think that bringing in Hopkins and having him integrated into this offense now is just a much better situation for him rather than Juju, who is coming off of a hamstring injury, by the way. Finally, Cedric Wilson is questionable with a shoulder injury. He got in 3 limited practices. It's not a fantastic matchup against the Browns, even at home anyway. And with the emergence of Marquez Valdez-Scantling, you'd probably just see Cedric Wilson split time with Mason Tipton in this offense. There's probably going to be a lot of Taysom Hill targets in this game. So MVS is probably on the field to be the stretch wide receiver. The other guys running these underneath routes. You probably don't need to worry too much about Cedric Wilson. Tight end is where the real information needs to come in this week. Dalton Kincaid is out for the Bills, so Dawson Knox I have elevated up to number 9 in the tight end rankings for half-point PPR. Noah Fant is out with a groin injury for Seattle. Additionally, Seattle's center also retired overnight, so they're going to have a new center for this game. I like the 49ers even more against the Seahawks at this point. But Burner is number 20 in the tight end rankings. Burner, hardly knew her. Probably don't need her in your fantasy lineup. Sam Laporta is out for the Lions against the Jags. Brock Wright, the Brock says, I'm number 13 in the tight end rankings this week. I like him more than A.J. Burner in the spot, but less than Dawson Knox. Michael Mayer is back after his personal injury or personal issues that he's been away from the team for 6 or 7 weeks from the Raiders right now. Harrison Bryant is not going to play in this game, so Mayer will step back into the role that he had earlier on in the season. Obviously, Brock Bowers, number 1 in the tight end rankings, not playing Michael Mayer, but it's nice to see him back on the field. Glad to see he got over what issues that he was having, and he's good enough to get back on the field at this point. George Kittle is leaning in with a hamstring injury. He is not officially a go in this game. Just keep an eye on that. It is a late set of games, so if you need to pivot off of someone, I guess in that same game, A.J. Burner would probably be the guy, depending on the options that are available in your league. I'm obviously holding out hope, if I own George Kittle, that he is going to play in this game, even in a limited capacity, just based on some of the options that you have at tight end this week. He is tight end number 5. We have seen Kyle Shanahan time over time that even when guys come in with an injury or expected to be limited, do not get used in that fashion at all. They use them at full strength until they eventually just get hurt later on in the game and have to come out. And we do this whole process all over again with the next week in terms of them being questionable for the next game. Finally, Isaiah likely has that hamstring injury. He is practicing on a limited basis at the moment, but I still have him out of the rankings. I have him leaning out right now, but that could all get changed by Saturday evening or even on Sunday morning when I do the update to the rankings, and I'll switch that around. But as a spoiler on this one, if Likely is in, I am dropping Mark Andrews from tight end number 4 down to tight end number 13 in the rankings. That would be one spot after Tucker Kraft, and Isaiah Likely would be just behind him. It's a tougher matchup against Pittsburgh, and frankly, the amount of snaps and routes that Mark Andrews would see with Likely back, even in a limited capacity, would be way below what he's going to get as almost a full-time player in this Ravens offense if Likely is sidelined. So just keep that in mind if you're holding out hope for Mark Andrews this week. Finally, at quarterback, Trevor Lawrence is out. Mac Jones is starting. That is bad news for everyone on the Jags, except maybe ETN for pass-catching purposes and maybe Evan Ingram because he just kind of trolls around the line of scrimmage. Mac Jones might be able to make that pass. I don't know if he can do it or not, but maybe he can make that completion. We'll see with Evan Ingram. He's number 10 in the tight end rankings in week number 11. The underdog picks for week number 11. I'll have the updated links and everything like that in the newsletter, but I need you to know that if you use code MAYO right now at Underdog, not only will you get a free pick for Sunday for Aaron Rodgers or Monday for CJ Stroud, if that's what you want, you will also get a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. And if week 10 taught us anything, is that we can win a lot of money on Underdog. A lot of big winners. Cleared a lot of money in week number 10. Cleared a lot of money in week number 9. I'm just glad that it's taken to this point of the season to get going on these underdog picks. Big loser on Thursday night because A.J. Brown could not get higher than his number. So let's rebound for the week. I got 2 separate options for you if this is the route that you want to go. And just a reminder again that some of these lines change by the time that you get to them. The people who watch this video early tend to get the better numbers. So many people end up tailing along with these that the numbers get adjusted pretty quickly. Ask Zach Ertz on Thursday night. That 3.5 was perfect. You put it out on X, and then all of a sudden it is dropped to like 0.8 of what it was before. But here's a quick one. It is 6 times your money using code MAYO. You can always throw on one of the other ones and boost this up to 10 times your money if you like. No one likes playing lowers on these, but that's where I am going for the first underdog entry of the week. I have Taysom Hill lower than 28.5 rushing yards against the Cleveland Browns. You really just are hoping that he doesn't break the big one because so many of Taysom Hill's carries come in short yardage situations where he's only looking to get 3 or 4 yards, either on 3rd and 1, 4th and 2, that kind of situation, or near the goal line. Cooper Rush lower than 2.5 rushing yards on Monday Night Football. This is one of my favorite plays of the week. Obviously, listen, he can fall forward for 3 yards and you feel like an absolute idiot for having this in, but he just doesn't go over this number because he doesn't rush the ball at all. Audric Estime is the final one, 55.5 rushing yards, lower on that front. You just have to hope that Atlanta can jump out to a little bit of a lead in this game, because all of a sudden Audric Estime gets sent back to the bench. Javonte and Jaleel end up coming in the Broncos backfield for pass catching situations. He probably needs to get over, well, listen, he can always break a big one, but if you get 10 to 12 carries in this game, even at 5 per carry, which is a pretty high estimate. At 4 per carry, you're still looking lower than the 55.5, and you could always have the situation where that was a 1-week blip a week ago because of the close game being up on Kansas City, and that was where they wanted to go game plan-wise, that they just used a ton of Estime in that contest, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be sticky week to week. Now, you can take those 3 and then add 2 more to get 20 times your money, which is what I have done as well. Nick Chubb higher than 58.5 rushing yards, and Jared Goff higher than 221.5 passing yards. If you watch any of the shows this week, the Best Bets, the Spread Show, the DK Show, you know that I love Jared Goff in a rebound situation at home against a terrible defense. Kind of got embarrassed and knocked down by the media on Sunday Night Football a week ago against the Texans after his 5-interception game. Dan Campbell is going to let him get right in this game against a defense that he can exploit. So Jared Goff, I love for higher than 221.5 passing yards. Now, if you don't like those ones, I do have another 4-banger cooked up. But once again, if you're new, at code Mayo, you get one of those free picks, the Rodgers or the CJ Stroud. You can throw them onto this to move it from 10 to 1 to 20 times your money. Now, again, that's 10 turns into $200. Hell, 100 turns into $2,000 off of that. That's how 20 to 1 works on this kind of stuff. But one of them is a free pick that you can use anyway. So I would recommend that you do that right now. All right, I'll wait. Thank you for signing up with code Mayo at Underdog. 10 times your money on this one without one of the free picks. With the free pick, of course, again, 20 to 1. Why are you passing on that? We're just heating up right now. Cooper Kupp higher than 67.5 receiving yards. Best case scenario here is what we saw on Monday night, where it's just dink and dunk down the field the entire time. You worry that Kyren Williams gets too involved in this game and just takes it over for the Rams against the Patriots. But this is only a 4.5-point spread. I do like the Rams in this game, but you also have the out that Christian Gonzalez just lines up on the outside against Puka, not necessarily shutting him down, but just alleviating some of the pressure that needs to come off Cooper Kupp, where you can just kind of dominate the Patriots out of the slot, and that's what we've been seeing from Cooper Kupp. So higher than 67.5 receiving yards. Devin Achane higher than 15.9 fantasy points. He'll probably have to score a touchdown in this scenario, which is pretty likely against the Raiders. Against the Raiders, not the Raiders, the Raiders. Christian McCaffrey higher than 18.2 fantasy points. He doesn't even need to score a touchdown in all actuality against the Seahawks to beat this number, but based on what we saw from McCaffrey a week ago in terms of workload, he didn't even get into the end zone or even really have a good game and still almost got to this number in week number 2. Coming back, you basically just need Achane and McCaffrey to score touchdowns. They should clear past this number easily in the higher. Then I'm going Brian Thomas, lower than 4.5 receptions. I do worry because the yardage number is 47.5 on Brian Thomas. He's dealing with this chest injury. He is going to play, but he has not been the same guy since dealing with this injury. And now that Mac Jones is in, yeah, he might get 5 really greasy catches, but he's not someone who just trolls the line of scrimmage. That is Evan Ingram. So unless they completely rework their strategy this week, I just don't see it happening for Jacksonville. I just like the lower than 4.5 receptions. 5 is a big number in the reception game, and Brian Thomas really isn't doing that without Trevor Lawrence. So you put those 4 together, you get 10 to 1, you add on that free pick with code Mayo, you get 20 times your money. We're at the time of year where people are going to ask you what you want for a gift, and you're going to say, I don't want anything, or I don't know. Here's an answer. Doer. My Doer pants I got last week are the most comfortable pieces of clothing that I own. I got a pair of denim stretch jeans and these joggers. These joggers are amazing. You get them in a whole bunch of colors, but they don't look like joggers. So when you go out into public, I mean, we would wear crappy jogging pants out in public because they're so comfortable all the time, but then people see you're like, who is this absolute goober walking around in his joggers wearing his pajamas? No. The Doer joggers look so good. They are lightweight, they are stylish, they are relaxed, and beyond anything, they, again, are the most comfortable things I own. I wore them like 3 days in a row, which is a lot for a pair of pants. I absolutely love my Doers, and I know you're going to love them too. Check out Doer's flagship stores in LA or Denver, or shop online at shopdoer.com/PME. Right now, here's the thing. My listeners, you good people, listening to the Pat Mayo Experience, get 20% off your first purchase when you use my exclusive URL, shopdoer.com/PME. This is an awesome deal. Don't wait. Go get 20% off right now at shopdoer.com/PME. As I mentioned off the top, with all the injuries and nothing really changing, this is probably the week where the DraftKings show actually holds up the most. So Tambo and I went through every single game, built out shells and the ones that we liked, and tried to fill in all of the pieces. And the chalk really hasn't changed. In fact, the chalk is kind of congealed all back into the same place, even more than we were looking before. So at running back for the week, the projected ownership right now, I mean, it's a very clear 3 guys that everyone is going to. And when you insert them into your lineup, that's how you kind of have to build off of them. Is everyone going to jam in all 3? I mean, the numbers would tell me no, because I have Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, and Devin Achane all projected at 30% or more ownership this week. That is a huge number for 3 guys, 3 expensive running backs, $82, $83, and $7,200. Other than that, in terms of ownership right now, Gibbs, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, all guys in the $7,000 range. David Montgomery's getting some steam. Kenneth Walker, even without their center, getting a little bit of steam. I would go down, listen, I like Kamara enough. I like Achane enough. If you can get to Bijan even against Denver at $7,800, he's coming in around 10% ownership. So 1/3 what those other guys are. He has that very similar upside. The other one would be Jonathan Taylor, who's looking like he's sub 8% right now against the Jets. There's a way to beat the Jets. You run all over them. And at $7,600, those seem to be the guys, along with Josh Jacobs, in that $7,000 range that are falling through the cracks. Initially, it seemed like Aaron Jones was going to be super highly owned against the Titans this week, but that is no longer looking like it's the case. He is $6,900. So if you did want to save money at running back, I mean, it's going to be difficult to sit there, make your lineups, see that everyone else has 2 of Achane, McCaffrey, or Kamara sitting there, and you have none of them, but there's pretty reasonable options. Like if you go Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, 2 of those 3, or Josh Jacobs, or hell, Nick Chubb is $6,000. I get that he's maybe not a great play, but he's a very nice pivot off of Jameis. If you didn't want to go that way, he's sub 10% owned, probably 5% owned. And he does have significant touchdown upside coming off a bye week after he's already been back for 2 weeks. I like his higher of the 58.5 rushing yards on Underdog already. I could see him breaking off 100 in this game. We haven't seen vintage Nick Chubb as of yet. Week 4, especially with a rest week in there against a bad Saints run defense, might be the route where you want to go. The only player, like Ramondre's right around 10 at $6,100. Nick Chubb around 6% at $6,000. They're all expensive-ish running backs this week where everyone is going, except for Audric Estime, who just based on being $4,500 by himself might get around 10%. I don't think that in large field tournaments he cracks that number. In fact, I think it comes in significantly lower. But I understand, listen, I went on the lowers on Estime. I don't like him this week, but at $4,500, he really is the one running back who has the potential to do anything from down there. I'm wrong all the time about this stuff. So you have to think about it in terms of probability. So when I take a look at his ceiling projection right now, it's only 15 points. That's the part that worries me about Estime here. What's the best case scenario for him against Atlanta? If we just think that, he absolutely wins you $1 million at $4,500. What does he get? 20 carries for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns and does nothing in the receiving game? That's the best case scenario. That's the 99th percentile outcome for Estime, where the more realistic version of this is 16 for 71 and no touchdowns and no catches. Like, that's not great. And we just don't know what the upside is in a 3-man backfield in a spot where if they get down, we don't see him in this game. I get why you take the chance at 45. It's not a move that I am making, especially with ownership going up and up and up for him. Like, you're probably better off playing Alexander Mattison at $5,500. I know Zamir White stole his touchdown the last time that we saw the Raiders on the field, but he's probably going to be the lead coming out of the bye. Minshew is back under center. He'll still get a little bit of work in the passing game. I don't like Madison, but at a third of the ownership, I get that he's more money, but yeah. I still like this spot right here. So this is the spot that I like the most. James Cook, 6,800 at like 5% against the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think it's a great spot, but Kareem Hunt on the other side of the ball is in a very delicious situation, and he's only $6,700. So if you're looking to get away from all of that high-end ownership of the $7,000 and above guys, like I said, Bijan and Taylor are the two, and I guess Josh Jacobs to a lesser extent at $7,100 that I like the most as the pivot plays if you need to get away from some of that ownership or just try to find a leverage spot. After that, in the sixes, it's Kareem Hunt for me at $67, $67 would be nice, $6,700. And then it'd be Nick Chubb at $6,000 in that nice matchup. But Hunt at 8%, very good matchup in my mind, at least. Maybe he doesn't score the touchdown and he's useless, but if no one is going to Hunt, that is probably the best spot in this game that you can go to. At wide receiver, we know how much of the correlation happens with the stacking and the quarterbacks that you end up using. But in terms of projected ownership right now, Kayshon Boutte, the booty man, Brutus, the barber, Beefcake, was the booty man in WCW before becoming the disciple. Now he's on the Patriots, and he's going to be incredibly owned at $3,500. So you see this with Audric Estime getting propped up at $4,500. Now, this is a direct 1v1 correlation with the guys that we saw at the very top of the running back board. If you have 3 running backs projected for over 30% and they're all at least $7,300, $7,400, 2 of them being above $8,000, well, then the ownership is going to have to go onto some of these cheaper guys at wide receiver at the other positions. And listen, the projection right now shows Boutte at 25% ownership. He's not going to be 25% owned. He's just not going to get, I don't even think 25% of the field knows who he is. So that becomes relatively problematic when you're seeing it up there, but optimizers are going to love him this week in a good matchup. Well, he's not a bad play. He's a bad play at 25% owned at $3,500, but just objectively, if there was no price tag if there was only price tag, no ownership attached to him, yeah, he's fine. But like his median projection, 7 points. It's not good. So you can pivot elsewhere for guys who are almost exactly the same at a similar price point. So if we go down a little bit more, like you play Elijah Moore for a little bit more money, there was someone at 33 earlier on. It was Curtis Samuel, who I think actually does now become, I thought initially that Samuel will be a really bad play because Cooper looks like he's going to play for the Bills. But if Cooper's wearing a cast, I do not know how much that he is going to do here. You're already missing Kincaid. Like, I would just take the shot on a 20, I mean, according to these projections, a 25 times lower owned Curtis Samuel, even if it's a fourth. Like, Samuel's going to be 1% owned, but he's probably going to be like 12 or 13 or something like that. I just thought that was very interesting. So he's really ballooning up. And then you just have all these mid-tier guys. None of the expensive receivers this week are going to draw any ownership because everyone's stacking up cheap quarterbacks with cheap receivers so they can pay for the expensive running backs. That's at least how the blueprint is working right now based on what I'm seeing. So Booty projects out very highly. And in the $5,000 range, you have Tillman, Myers, Cortland Sutton, Juwan Jennings, DeAndre Hopkins all appear inside the top 10 of most owned receivers, all 5 of those players in the $5,000 range. You don't normally see that all that often. Shakir showing some ownership, Elijah Moore at 43. Showing a lot of ownership. Debo shows a lot of ownership. I just don't think it's realistic to think that he is going to get there. Just based off of what I'm seeing in terms of those running back projections. And when Tambo and I were building out lineups, it was just hard to get to, unless you went out of your way to jam in a $6,800 Debo Samuel, it was just hard to get there. It's not like you just randomly had $6,800 left over. More what you saw was having 58 left over or 63 left over based on where the popular plays were coming in. And that was using a super cheap defense to go along with it. So if you upgrade at defense and upgrade at tight end away from some of the cheaper options, then there's no chance that you get to Pickens or Debo unless these are the specific stacks you are playing. So as one-offs or skinny stacks, they might be a nice place to go target because I believe that they're going to come in for lower ownership than you think, and they'll almost always be correlated to whatever quarterback that you have. So you can move off of that for these high upside guys. Like, I don't love Debo this week, but he's still Debo. He's a 3-touchdown upside type player that if you can work him in here and there instead of having to go to, let's say, David Montgomery at 65, you can find the $300 as a one-off in that situation. Might be a nice spot to get to. But that is what we're seeing at wide receiver. At quarterback, and this will correlate more with some of the receivers. Purdy, that's where the Debo stuff is coming in, but you'll probably see Purdy with Jennings more often than not, or Christian McCaffrey as the 3-man stack. Ricky Bullett's coming in at 4,700 as well. It's just easier to fit in, feel okay with the rest of your lineup than having in Debo in that spot. So Purdy, Jameis, Bo Nix, and Geno are the top 4 projected quarterbacks right now. And just those are all cheap quarterbacks, the most expensive being Purdy, but Winston 55, Geno 57, Drake May is 56. He projects out to be 5th right now. Russell Wilson's 59. He projects out to be 7th. Tua, Anthony Richardson, Sam Darnold. None of the high-end quarterbacks are receiving any sort of ownership this week. Like Josh Allen, 4%. Lamar, we built out the Lamar team. It's tough to do, and you probably have to pass on the higher end options from that game. But the way that you can do it, that we found, was use Lamar, and you can use him with like Bateman, maybe Andrews, or just use him with Bateman and hope that he ends up rushing for a bunch, or it gets completely spread out, but Lamar still hits his 35 fantasy points. And then you have to bring it back with like Pickens on the other side, or you use him with Zay Flowers, and that seems to be a 1v1 correlation that way. I'm just saying that like Lamar, Josh Allen, Stafford's pretty low. Just because it's hard to stack him up. Yes, Stafford's only 5,800, but his 2 best options are almost $8,000 a piece. Davis Allen, just watch out for Davis Allen, that he's going to get jammed into a ton of lineups, and he's not very good. So that becomes a bit of an issue. But you can see where where the quarterback's going with those receivers and why those specific receivers are getting boosted up in correlation with those expensive running backs. You can just see how that all goes. If you wanted to flip it on its head this week, no one else is doing it. I mean, it's terrifying to do if you use like a Lamar stack. And you can tune into the Friday show and see, and just click on the Baltimore game to see how Tambo and I built out those shells and what you have to do and what the rest of your lineup ends up looking like if you go with an expensive quarterback this week. It's not pretty, put it that way. Just as there's no pay down options at running back. There's like no one you can use below $6,000. I already went through. So it just becomes so difficult, and you have to cheap out at every other position in order to make that work. At tight end, Davis Allen's looking like he's going to be the most high owned tight end at $2,500. Just pure pass for me on this one. Maybe he scores a touchdown. Maybe he's like 5 for 25 and a touchdown. Then obviously he is going to be worth having at $2,500. That is the best case scenario for him. His median projection is 4 fantasy points. And I think that is high in a game where they're likely to be up and not passing the entire time. He will be blocking for the good players on the Los Angeles Rams. He is more likely to have 1 catch for 9 yards and a touchdown than break the slate. That doesn't even do it for you. Dawson Knox is $1,000 more, but he's only $3,500. He is the second projected highest owned tight end right now, but he's a much better play. Hunter Henry at 12% at $3,900, also a very good play. Then you have Kelsey, Jonnu Smith, Brock Bowers. So there's not really a ton going on here. AJ Barner, who I mentioned earlier, is $3,100. I think he's a better option than Davis Allen. I just don't like Davis Allen at all. Other than that, it's either like pay up, pay down, because the mid-range options are not good. If you are paying up, Kelsey and Bowers do appear to be the ones that people are going to. No one is really playing Kittle. He is 1% ownership at $6,000 right now. And Njoku only 5. The best stack that I think that we actually built out on the Friday show was the Jameis with Judy and Njoku stack, MVS coming back the other way. And then you can jam in those high-end running backs. Just a different way to use Jameis with MVS, and since so many are using Moore and Tillman in order to save all that money, this way you can fill up your tight end slot very easily, get access to a cheap receiver on the other side, and use Judy, who seems to be the most unpopular of the Browns receivers, despite being the best of all the Browns receivers. That's the way that I would play that scenario instead of loading up on the chalky version of Jameis. In terms of defense this week, the Titans just keep going higher and bigger and bigger and bigger, just like from the Amber Waves documentary that we heard about Dirk Diggler, just bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah, 20% owned Titans, pass. I get they're playing Sam Darnold. I get their $2,300. I would just look for a different direction of the cheap ends. So you have Jacksonville at 22. Don't love that against the Lions. I don't love the Seahawks against the Niners at 4% either. But for a $100 more, you can get to the Raiders against Tua or the Bears against Jordan Love. Listen, they're not great options, but they aren't 20% owned. Like, the only reason the Titans are 20% owned, you get the Darnold effect, you get the home effect, the fact they're like an okay defense, they might get there. But if 1/5 of the field is playing the cheapest defense or the second cheapest defense, I'll just take another cheap defense and hope for the best. It's defense. No one can predict this stuff. Just go to a different option that no one else has, and you'll probably just skyrocket the field in that sense. Hell, you could take the Patriots against Stafford outdoors, going cross country for an early game. I don't like that either. They're a terrible defense, but $2,500. If you can get to the Browns at 26 or the Colts at 26, that's where I would feel most comfortable. No one is really going in that direction. And when you take a look at the ownership overall, it's Titans 23, Dolphins 3,000, Rams $3,200, then the Bears, then the Packers at 35. So those are the popular pay up and pay down options. If you can somehow find a way to get to the Vikings, which is very difficult in a week like this, as I've talked about, because there's so few pay down options. Why would you waste $1,300 at defense? I agree with you. Even wasting the extra $2 to go up to the Colts or Browns from the Bears seems like, it seems like a splurge in this economy with that inflation. No. You probably can't do that. But if you can get to the Vikings, no one is using them, and they are the best matchup of the week against Will Levis, just attacking him over and over. That's a defense that could score 2 touchdowns in this game. That's why I don't like any of the Vikings' offensive skill players. I just think they turn over and just pressure. I mean, Aaron Jones is probably the only one I really like. Everyone else just doesn't seem like they have to do anything in this game. And that's what we've been seeing from Sam Darnold anyway. So you double leverage off of it. You take the highest owned defense, you pay more money, you go to the other side to the better defense that no one is using, and just pile up points in this game that way. If you can figure out how to do it, that's likely the way that you need to go. But it's a lot like the Debo situation that I mentioned earlier, where unless you're going out of your way to play Debo, you're probably not going to end up falling onto him. Additionally, the same thing is true with the Vikings defense, where if you're not going out of your way to play them, then you're probably not going to fit them in. Although I do think the 2v2 between Colts D and Jonathan Taylor directly translates in to Vikings D and Aaron Jones. I could be off by a few $100s on either side of that, but that's just an interesting way that you can go through with it. Basically, the cost benefit here is you don't get to play Alvin Kamara, you have to play Aaron Jones instead, but instead of playing Titans D, you get to play Vikings D along with it. That's sort of the 2v2 range that you're looking at right now if you're going to pivot off of one of those. And I actually don't mind that because it's a double pivot. You're getting off chalk running back, chalk defense onto, listen, Aaron Jones is not unowned, but he's in a good spot, but he is worse than Kamara, granted, and you just have to hope that this 1% Vikings defense absolutely obliterates the 20% owned Titans defense. There's a reason that Titans defense at $2,300 is in, because they will directly correlate with McCaffrey and Kamara at the top, because those guys are so damned expensive. You need that defense in order to make it work. So are you willing to do that? Well, that question has to be on you, because you're the one hitting enter on all of these lineups. All right, smash like, sub to the channel while you're here. The Sunday or the Saturday evening update on the newsletter comes out. I will update that again for any additional information on Sunday morning if you bookmark that link. So go ahead and go do that right now. Thank you. Code Mayo with Underdog will get you the $1,000 up to deposit and a free pick. Along with the plays that I have, I'll include those in the newsletter. If I see anything else new come out on the Underdog front, I will add that either on X or into the newsletter, wherever it might be, whenever I see it. All right, thank you all for watching. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!